Today I'd like to continue our reflection on Channel 11, chapter 11 of the Gospel of Matthew, and take a look at what it is telling us about wisdom, about Jesus's approach to his ministry. In verse 19 of chapter 11, it talks about the Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they said, "Look, he is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. But wisdom is vindicated by her works." So the book of Proverbs have some reflections in terms of that wisdom. And wisdom, as we know, is rejected by the foolish. The foolish always say, that's silly. We don't need that wisdom. We have our own wisdom. We follow our own ways. And so they reject wisdom. And Jesus is coming really to share wisdom with the people, to share not only how to live our lives in terms of following God's commandments, but really how to reach out to other people and share God's message of love and peace and kindness with others. So Jesus has come with that idea of sharing wisdom. Jesus is talking here about how wisdom is really vindicated by its fruits, as we're going to see that the fruits of wisdom really generate more wisdom. Jesus and John, of course, were both rejected. And so they come bearing wisdom, they're rejected. It is the foolish who reject wisdom. So we can say that those who reject Jesus, who reject John the Baptist, they are foolish. And of course, we have the same reality today. We have people who reject wisdom. Say, I'm not going to follow that. I know better. This is the way we should live our lives. And we would say, well, are they really wise or are they foolish? And really, wisdom is vindicated by the works that come forth from wisdom. We see in the book of Proverbs, chapter 1, verse 23 to 25, "How long will you turn away at my reproof? Lo, I will pour out to you my spirit. I will acquaint you with my words." God is saying, I'm going to give you my spirit. I'm going to pour out my spirit. My words, I'm going to make those words known to you. It's not that God is going to hold them back and that God does not want to share the wisdom with the people. God is saying quite directly in the book of Proverbs, that's what I'm about. I want to share wisdom with you. I want to share those words. Because I called you and you refused. So God calls, but we're refusing that call. I extended my hand and no one took notice. So God has come. God has extended the hand. God is reaching out to us. God is calling us. But it is we who are refusing the hand of God. And it's such a beautiful image because you think of a mother or father reaching out their hand to a child. And what that symbolizes. It symbolizes the love of that parent, the care, the concern. They want to make sure that child is safe. And the child, in complete and utter trust, reaches out her or his hand to the parent. What a beautiful image that is of God, of God's care for us, of God's trust for us. God is literally saying in the book of Proverbs, I'm reaching out this hand to you. I want to guide you. I want to share wisdom with you. I want to show you the way. But it says in the book of Proverbs, no one took notice. So the hand was there, but people didn't notice the hand. And you kind of reflect on it yourself and you say, well, how many times has God shared a message with me and God shared wisdom with me? And I haven't really reflected on it. I haven't took notice of it. And I've been so involved in my own projects, my own ideas, my own concerns, that I totally missed the boat on that. And I missed the hand of God. I missed the wisdom of God. And it says then in the book of Proverbs, in verse 25, chapter 1, because you disdained all my counsel and my reproof you ignored. So we have disdained the counsel, the wisdom from God, and the reproof that God gives us. And God says, well, if you do this, bad things are going to happen. If you're so self-centered, if you don't reach out to those that are poor and those that are in need, if you're not a person of justice and caring for others, if you turn your back on them, bad things will happen to you. That is God's reproof to us. But sometimes we don't embrace it. It's interesting, too, in verse 19, Jesus speaks about how the Pharisees and the scribes and the religious authorities have characterized Jesus. They have said, look, he is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus, of course, would say, well, shouldn't we all be friends to the tax collectors and sinners? You know, they're the ones who need us. They're the ones who have gone astray and need our help, need that hand of God, need that wisdom to be brought back. And as far as being a glutton and a drunkard, certainly celebrating the good things that God has given us, the food, the wine that God has given us. Those are goods that can be used well and used responsibly. So the idea of a glutton and a drunkard, we see it in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 21, verse 20 in the Hebrew Scriptures, which says, where they shall say to those city elders, the son of ours is a stubborn and unruly fellow who will not listen to us. He is a glutton and a drunkard. So calling Jesus a glutton and a drunkard echoes that verse from Deuteronomy, where that son was stubborn and unruly and would not listen to us. So in some ways, the authorities are saying, well, Jesus is not listening to us. It's not like we're not listening to Jesus. No, he's not listening to us. He's not following our ways and our wisdom. Jesus is proclaiming something different and something that is just wrong. So from the perspective of the religious authorities, Jesus is the one who is not following the wisdom. And when Jesus speaks about that vindication that comes from his wisdom, vindication that will follow from that, the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verse 8 says, sincere are all the words of my mouth, not one of them is wily or crooked. So Jesus is simply saying, I'm being sincere. I'm sharing the message that God has given. I'm not trying to deceive anyone. I'm just telling them what God has told me. And I'm sharing that with them. And then in Proverbs chapter 8, verse 20, on the way of duty, I walk along the paths of justice. So Jesus, in his wisdom, what is he doing? He is walking along those paths of justice. So really, what is Jesus sharing with us in verse 19, in chapter 11? He's sharing the wisdom of God. And he's telling us quite simply, quite transparently, that to follow God is to embrace the right path, the path of justice. And that involves reaching out to those people that the rest of society might ignore. Yes, they're considered tax collectors, they're considered sinners, they're considered prostitutes, they're considered lepers, they're considered to be outside of the community. And I should ignore them. I should neglect them. That's the wisdom, right? But Jesus is saying, no, aren't these the very people who need to hear the good news of God's love? So in our own day, we pose, of course, the same question. Who are those that we know who are most in need of that message? The message is simple. They're loved by God. God wants to share the wisdom of God with them. God wants to help them. And primarily, I think that comes from listening to the people, listening to their needs, and guiding them to realize, yes, you are loved. Maybe you have sinned. Maybe you have gone astray. Maybe you have done things that you regret and you're upset about. But God is a God of mercy, a God of forgiveness, a God who wants to reach out to you. It's not so much about the law, and of course the law is important and significant, but it's about forgiveness when we have gone astray, when we have broken the law, when we have done those things that we shouldn't do. And that, Jesus is saying, is true wisdom. And that's why Jesus is rejecting the labels that the authorities, the religious authorities, are trying to put on him.